But I was taking a look this morning about the value of Truth Social these days and his interest in Truth Social. And I believe it's valued now at $4 billion. Is there a possibility he could look into selling off his interest in Truth Social to make up for this money?
Well, Truth Social is interesting, and I think first, though, we should just, we don't know how much cash he has on hand, and I think that's just a good thing to say up front.
Yeah.
There's been filings that were presented in the Attorney General's case that was recently decided, documents that they got in the course of discovery in that case that indicated, about a year ago, you're seeing that he had maybe 300 million. He said 400 million. I don't necessarily, we don't know. I don't doubt those amounts, just given some of the paperwork I've seen. But in the interim, he could have taken out a lot of cash. So we really don't know how much cash he has on hand. But in addition to Trump Tower, he does have other assets that he could potentially pledge. And I know that they're looking now at doing this potential appeal bond. But you mentioned Truth Social, and it's interesting. That is, of course, his social media company, and it has been losing money. It's kind of this fledgling company, but it was recently green-lighted by the Securities and Exchange Commission to merge with a public company that does have some money. And his share in that, just based on the shares trading of that public company, are worth about $4 billion. It's a big number, but it's paper money right now. He's got the shares, his shares are locked up until at least the fall.
Wow.
And we don't know what the company will be trading at then. And of course, if he does go ahead and sell, I would imagine it would be pretty devastating to the company, because it would be a large percentage of the company that he would have to sell. But of course, the proceeds of that sale would be subject to taxation, whatever it is. So it's a hypothetical $4 billion. It's not to say it's nothing. We just don't know what that company would be valued at on the day that he could sell it. And I would imagine anybody that would be looking, that any company that would be looking to the appeal bond would not want that as security, just because there's just a lot of ifs to get to that $4 billion.
Right. That's not something that he can necessarily offer as collateral.
Yeah. They're going to want bricks and mortar.
As we look, Dave, through this appeals process, he's going to be accruing more interest the entire time, right? Every day that passes, he owes more money, which does not work to his benefit necessarily. Is there anything that you think that the Trump team can prove here in this appeal possibly that would maybe reduce what he owes?
Yasmin, I think this verdict is pretty airtight because Judge Engoron meticulously went through every reason why he ruled the way he ruled. And he gave Trump a lot of leeway at trial. He even let Trump give part of his closing argument and sat by as Trump lit into him, just attacked him pretty ferociously. No other judge, I think, would have done that, but he wanted to ensure that this verdict would stay on appeal. Now, could an appellate court reduce it somewhat? Sure, but it's still a massive judgment against Trump, because at present, it is about $450 million if you include the interest. So even if it gets brought down some, I don't think it's going to get brought down that much, but it's still a real hit in his pocketbook. He's going to have to sell a lot of those gold sneakers with red soles to pay this off.
He has sold a lot of them, though. Just got to put that out there. Giving credit to those gold sneakers. It seems like they're raking them in. Dave Aronberg, thank you. Suzanne Craig, thank you.